Wonderful. So listening to children and young people can often feel like another checkbox we need to tick, but this isn't the way it should feel. So how do we move beyond listening to children and young people as a requirement to actually wanting to hear from children and young people? So I think the most important thing is that we need to start with mindset. We need to believe that children and young people should be heard and that they have valuable insights, ideas, and contributions to bring to the table. So to start, I'm keen to hear from you. We have 2 short live questions in Slido. So you can join Slido at slido.com. You can do this on your mobile or on another screen on your computer. So I'll just give you a moment to jump onto slido.com and then you enter that code. Wonderful. Once we've got most people in, we'll move on to the first question. Just let us know if you have any issues there. So the first question I want to ask you all is, why should we listen to children and young people? There's no right answers here. There's a whole bunch of answers. So from your point of view, why do you think we should listen to children and young people? Thinking and typing going on. It's great. Hey, fantastic. They have different perspectives and point of views, fresh perspectives, their voice matters, helps determine the future. Yeah, amazing. Have experience, ideas, perspective, understand the challenges. Yeah. Great. Thank you all. There's some fantastic response. Yeah. Future generation. Yeah. Love that all. So there's some common themes there around perspective. It's important that they're heard on decisions. They are the future and they bring interesting experience. Great. We might move on to the next question. But we know it actually can be hard to engage young people. We won't pretend that it's easy and something that we might put on the back burner sometimes. So what are the main barriers you face to consulting children and young people? And this could be quite specific to your role or function in your team, or it could be a bit more systemic. So just have a go at thinking about what are some of the barriers you face to consulting children and young people. And just give you another moment there. So maybe some barriers could be don't actually know how to do that. There feels like there's many restrictions and bureaucracy just in trying to reach young people. Might just feel like lots of hard work to do. I don't know. Maybe I haven't got the organisational buy-in. There's kind of, yeah, it doesn't seem to be a need to do it. I'm not sure. There's no wrong answers here. Oh, this one has only 25 word limit. Sorry. This one I may have done it as a word cloud, Maria. Maybe it's hard for them to come in. That might be my...
There are answers on there.
Oh, there are answers? Oh, they're not coming up for me. I don't know why. Apologies.
That's okay.
Do you want to read out some of the answers?
Yeah,
we'll get Emma to read out some of the answers. Sorry, they're not appearing for me. For someone else, they're not appearing too. That's okay. We'll get Emma to read out some of them here. Oh, we just need your sound on, Emma. Thanks. Here we go.
Yeah, sorry about that. Now. Oh, have you got them now? There we are.
Yes. Yeah, we can see them now. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Just getting access to them. Yes, that is hard. Especially when it might feel like you've got lots of hoops and barriers to jump through there. Permission, bias, tokenism, seen as too hard. Yes, thank you. Really good answers there. Thank you for your input. We'll jump on to the next slide. Appreciate all that. So for many of us, listening to children and young people may feel quite intangible. In most cases, this is because we have no reference point for what it actually looks like or means. So I'd like to start off with two stories of where I've seen youth consultation in action, just to bring this to life a little bit more. So the first example is a global example from a very different context. However, I'd like to share to open our minds around what's possible and challenge our expectations. The second example is a little bit closer to home in my work with CCYP. So the first story is from Tanzania, actually, about 10 years ago. I had the opportunity to chaperone two young people over to something called the World Vision International Triennial Council. So this is a meeting that happens every 3 years between World Vision boards right around the world. So I think about 80 countries send a board representative to this meeting every 3 years. At this meeting, as a child-focused organisation, they decided that they wanted to start listening to children and young people at the highest levels of governance in the organisation. So for the very first time, they actually had young people as representatives at this meeting. It was incredible. So over a few days, the young people would share meals with some of the board members and engage in different activities and present some of their views and experiences back to this international group of board members. And there was one amazing moment. One of the young people I chaperoned was an Indigenous young person, and she had this incredible opportunity to talk with a board member from Brazil. And she said her story about being in a World Vision program here, and essentially she was able to connect with her cultural background in a really new way, and even meet family members that she didn't know she had before through this program. And she shared her story with this board member, and the board member from Brazil was quite moved by her story, and actually was a real wake-up call that they weren't doing enough for Indigenous people in Brazil. And she wanted to go back to Brazil and start to do more with their Indigenous people. For the young person, the Indigenous young person, she had never even considered that there were Indigenous young people right around the world. And it was a really big moment for her of just having her eyes opened and actually kind of seeing how she could have a voice and influence at that level as well. And I love that story because it's a really amazing example of two-way learning. Sometimes as adults, we feel like we know it all, or we have more experience. But as being adults, it's actually about humbling ourselves and actually saying we do have things to learn from children and young people. They do bring really unique perspectives, and their voice is important at the table. The second story I'd like to share is about a recent event I ran here at CCYP called the Youth Period Summit. So this was our first real youth-led event where I worked with 12 young people over about 3 months to bring this event together. So as you can imagine with an event, there's lots to organise, but on top of that, imagine having 12 chefs in the kitchen trying to give you thoughts and ideas of what you should do and how you should bring the event together. So at times it was challenging, working out how to delegate well and give them things that they could do, but wasn't asking too much of them. But I think the real value in it is that they brought things to the event that I, as an adult, wouldn't have thought of or couldn't bring. So they came up with some amazing ideas. So one of the uni students came up with an idea to develop a period language guide, which was just a simple guide that had what to say, what not to say, and why. So, for example, saying menstruators and not saying women and girls, and why. And that was on the table, everyone's place on the table as they arrived. And that was a really great way to start the conversation at the event. They also came up with an idea to have question bags on the table. So being an educational event and there being a lot of shame and stigma around periods for young people, we wanted to have a safe way people could ask questions without it being embarrassing, too hard to ask. So those question bags proved amazing. We had over 50 questions that we had to follow up after the event to answer, which is an amazing thing to have. They also just brought a great energy and vibe. We had 3 young people emceeing. They decided to have stalls and artworks. Again, things me as an adult would not necessarily think as first things to do with an event like this. So these are 2 very different examples in 2 really different contexts, but my 2 key learnings from them both are is that listening to children and young people is not always easy or convenient, but it does result in better outcomes through two-way learning. And it does require commitment and intentionality. From an organisational perspective, you do need to make a commitment, an intentional commitment around choosing to engage children and young people. If you move on to the next slide, Maria. So I'd now like to share two theories, I guess, two models of understanding youth participation, just to give us a theoretical base for what this is. So Hart's Letter of Youth Participation is one I'm probably quite familiar with and used for some time. It's an older model. It was developed by Roger Hart in 1992. And he essentially has these 8 rungs of participation. Well, 3 of them, the bottom 3, are non-participation. So I actually find that really helpful to defining what isn't participation. Sometimes it's more helpful to know what it's not to start off with. So those non-participation rungs are manipulation, decoration, and tokenism. And then there's 5 other rungs that are participation that you can see there. So it just shows you that there's varying ways to engage young people. They all are important and all are needed. For the point of today, we're mainly focusing on rung 5 there, which is consulted and informed. So that's what we're kind of talking about today. Let's go to the next slide, Maria. The next model is Lundy's model, Voice is Not Enough. So this is a slightly newer model from 2007. It takes a very rights-based approach, and we use this a lot in our work here at CCYP. So the framework is based on the child rights model of participation developed by Professor Laura Lundy from Queen's University, provides guidance for decision makers on the steps to take in giving children and young people a meaningful voice in decision making. And it's underpinned by the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So under the rights of the child, right 12 is the respect for children's views. And she breaks that into 2 components. So she says stage 1 is the right to express that view, and stage 2 is the right for those views to be given due weight. So this model is goes around like as so starts from space and goes around kind of in chronological order. And her main argument is that voice is not enough. So it's not enough to say, well, this model is, this survey is open for young people, therefore we're listening to them. She says, first you need to provide space. So you actually need to have a safe space where young people and children can feel like they can express their views. Cool, really great comment there on Hart's Letter from Celia. I didn't know it went so far back. It's awesome. So then space, and then that moves into voice. So can't just have space, you need to have voice where you actually help to facilitate children and young people's views. And then, so that's kind of the right to express the views, and then it moves into audience. So if you're going to have a survey, but then no one's going to listen to it, that's not youth participation. So the views must be listened to, and you kind of do need to be clear about who is going to listen to those views. And then the final one is influence. So the views must be acted upon as appropriate, so that decision makers take those views into consideration when they're making decisions. I'll give examples in some of our surveys later on to show how these are actually expressed to children in an easy to understand way. But that's Lundy's model, which is a great basis to understand. If we move into the next slide, Maria. So the bad news here, there is a need to design consultations specifically for young people. So unfortunately, you can't take the same approach or design you've used with adults and simply cookie cutter it for kids and young people. Intentionality and purposeful design is required to develop effective consultations for children and young people. And this does require more time and effort, particularly at first as you're doing this. So that's the bad news. But the good news is engaging and listening to children and young people opens two-way learning and strengthens your work as a team and as a department. So consultations specifically for children and young people will lead to better outcomes for the communities you work with, which can save time and money and increase effectiveness long term. So when you get it right, it's actually an amazing, fantastic thing that can strengthen all the work that you do. Moving to the next slide, Maria. I'd now like to provide 6 practical tips for consulting children and young people. I want to keep this really practical. I don't want it to feel daunting. You can each go away today and do something. So I'd like to walk through these 6 simple tips to help you give this a go. These aren't rocket science. I've kept them simple as I want you to walk away from today feeling like you can do this and that it doesn't remain in the too hard basket. So the first tip is consent. Next slide. And I know this came up as a bit of a barrier of how do we actually reach or get to these young people, and consent is part of that. So consent is an important part of ensuring children and young people understand their rights and are engaging in a consultation safely. It is the way we value, respect and protect young people. So some protections we use at CCYP, firstly, we never record names or identifying details. We only record age and gender. For young people under 18 years old, we recommend asking for consent to share their views. It's important that children and young people understand how their views will be shared, which comes back to Lundy's model that those views are going to be taken seriously. For young people under 15 years old, we also recommend asking for parental consent, and I'll explain why it's 15 in a moment. On to the next slide. Just got an example here of an example permission form. We probably would use this more for face-to-face consultations, but I still think it's a great example. You can see there's a link there to the Civics and Citizenship website where we have all these tools and resources available. I'll just point a few things out that I like about this permission form. Often we use the phrase, I say yes or yes, and that's a really simple way to explain what consent is to kids and young people. Down the bottom in italics, you can see it says it's quite clear how their views will be shared. So it says it means we may use it in reports, social media, website examples. So they're really understanding when they're ticking I'm okay to share my views, they're understanding how it will be used. On the right side of the permission form, it says children and young people, as far as possible, should make decisions in dealing with their personal information themselves. Please sign and date below. I really like this language as it does empower young people over 15 to consent to their own participation. On the point about why 15, so we take that age from the Australian Information Commissioner. So the Privacy Act of 1988 protects an individual's personal information regardless of their age. It doesn't specify an age which an individual can make their own privacy decision. So for their consent to be valid, an individual must have capacity to consent. So if it's not practical for an organisation or agency to assess the capacity of individuals on a case-by-case basis, as a general rule, an organisation or agency may assume an individual over the age of 15 has capacity. So that's just where that's from. Could be helpful as a best practice thing. Moving on to the next slide. Thanks, Maria. Second practical element is clear purpose. So this means really thinking about what you're asking from young people. And 4 things to be really clear about. So the first is the scope of influence. So being really honest about where decisions have already been made. So they can't change policy just like that, but you can say a decision has been made to do this and we want your input into what it looks like. The context. So why now? Why right now are you asking young people for their input on this particular thing? Your aims and purpose, so what you're hoping to get out of it by asking them, and also the stages of the project. So, we can expect to deliver a report to Parliament next year or whatever it is in terms of what they can expect next. And on to the next slide, thanks. I'll keep emphasising this point as we go, so short and simple. This is one of the most important takeaways from today, I hope. The use of language, length and density of text are all important, so shorter and simpler is better and will lead to valuable insights. It should be clear to young people that the engagement has been designed for them. And only ask what you generally want answers to. If you don't actually want to answer to a particular question, it might not be the right one to ask. Define anything that needs to be defined, like key terms and concepts. It can also be worth keeping things open for young people to share their understanding of an issues or idea. So, for example, asking young people, what do you want adults to know about this topic? And this can help acknowledge any underlying assumptions. And the next slide, thanks, Maria. Strengths-based. It's probably all have heard of strengths-based in some form or another, but I'll just provide one definition from the Children and Family Intensive Support. They say a strengths-based approach is a way of working that focuses on abilities, knowledge and capacities rather than deficits or things that are lacking. Their approach recognises that children and families are resilient and are capable of growth, learning and change. The intention of this approach is not to avoid or minimise problems, challenges or risks, but to identify the assets or strengths that can be built upon. A few examples of strengths-based questions are what could be different, what would change look like, what future would you like to see, what issue is most important to you in your community, what is working well, what needs to be improved, what are you proud of, and what would you like to tell adults about this issue. I think it also means designing consultations to be as inclusive and accessible as possible. The two examples of this is like just a year 7 level of literacy, so a really basic level of literacy to assume that most people can read and engage and understand what you're saying, which also means not using jargon or difficult terms wherever you can. Oh, good point. What was number 4? Did I miss a point there? Sorry. I think point number 4 was short and simple. Maybe I may have missed a point. There might only be 5. Oh no, here we go. Sorry, got them in the wrong order there. Thanks, Maria. I think I had them in the wrong order. Testing is about seeking continuous improvement in your consultation and acknowledging the limitations of our assumptions, especially when it comes to engaging young people. So no matter how youthful or cool you feel, me included, you can still miss the mark on what will engage children and young people well. So I would always recommend testing a survey or consultation with a small group of young people before sharing it more broadly, and even if that's with a handful of your own kids. You're likely to learn things when you put it in front of your audience and get ideas on how to strengthen or improve the consultation, and that's a really good thing. On the next slide, I have a worksheet here from a face-to-face consultation we ran in term 2 this year. This was a first draft, so looks fairly simple and straightforward, right? It's not too wordy, you know, ask them to think about how school can be better, what we can do to make schools better. And the audience was young people in grade 8, 9 and 10. Would anyone like to guess what happened when we tested this with young people? Any guesses out there? Feel free to take yourself off mute if you've got a guess.
They challenged the bits at the top.
Sorry, what was that?
Did they challenge the criteria at the top?
The criteria at the top, yeah, good guess. I'll let someone else have said relationships. Yeah, interesting. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. I'll show you, because I wasn't expecting it either. I thought, oh, this looks pretty simple, straightforward. After testing it, we realised it was actually too complex. We're asking way too many things. So we decided to go down from 24 boxes to 8 boxes with one simple question rather than 3. Really interesting, right? As an adult, you look at that sheet and go, that's pretty simple, but that's why it's important to test. So this is also a good example of a strengths-based approach. Note that we're not asking us to tell us everything wrong with your school. It's not really a helpful conversation. We're inviting them to imagine solutions in an ideal future. Next slide, thanks. Generally speaking, it doesn't work to open a survey to young people and expect that they will just find it and complete it. You do need to go to them. And even us, we actually do have to go out to different organisations too when we're doing surveys as well sometimes. So it's really, this is quite an important part. So I've got some ideas for how you might reach young people. Firstly, approaching other organisations that might help or share it for you, especially if you don't have existing connections or know where to start. So this could be organisations that have specific experience and expertise working with young people. So the Youth Affairs Council of South Australia have a monthly newsletter, and they're always very happy to post opportunities in there. CCYP, us, we do share things with young people. Using social media, and also local councils are fantastic. Lots of local councils have young people that they work with. Using social media as a channel to reach particular groups of young people and asking like-minded organisations or groups that engage with young people to share. Approaching known networks of engaged young people. So some examples of quite engaged young people here in South Australia are UN Youth, SA Youth Parliament, SA SRC, which we run, and Hub Adelaide, which is like an online platform, content kind of platform website, and Instagram as well. Approaching schools that have demographics relevant to your consultation. Maybe they live in that area, or it's on a particular topic that might affect students in a particular way. Asking government agencies and services I thought was also a good idea. So potentially like a poster with a QR code that could be up in a service, or like, doctor's centre, library, youth centre, school could be another avenue. If we move on to the next slide. Oh, actually here I'm going to share an example. So even better than others sharing it is actually young people themselves sharing it. So I've got an example, quite a recent example, that Marie is going to play for us.
Just bear with me. I need to do this. Hopefully it works.
Thanks, Maria.
No worries. Can you see my screen, my new screen now? Yep, perfect.
Only a few more weeks
Can
to
you
have your
hear?
say on the South Australian Youth Action Plan.
As young people, it is so important that our voices are being heard on issues which impact us.
Every few years, the South Australian government hears from young people to work out what they want to see over the next few years. The South Australian Youth Action Plan covers multiple different areas. This can be from education, health,
Safety and justice, social and emotional well-being,
civics, even local employment.
connections and access to resources, citizenship and participation.
Let's say, for instance, you really are passionate about having free transport for young people in South Australia. Now's your chance to have your say.
The cutoff date for this survey is on the 6th of August, which is very soon, so we need to be making sure that we fill it out as soon as possible and are sharing it with as many friends as possible to ensure that our voices are being heard and represented.
Go on to YourSAy and go to SA Youth Action Plan 2023-2026 and give what you think should be in the SA Youth Action Plan.
Amazing, thanks for sharing. So that's actually from two of our interns here at CCYP that work on the Hub Adelaide. Just really awesome. It's always so much more powerful coming from young people themselves, and as opening up new networks. So where you can, it's great to engage young people. Perfect, we'll go to the next slide. Great, so I just want to share two other examples from social media. So this first example is a post about the vaping survey that we ran, I think it was last year. The first thing I like about it straight up front is that it's anonymous. So vaping has been a bit of a hot issue, I guess, and lots of young people have been getting into trouble, and lots of schools have been taking many different approaches. So having it anonymous was pretty important right up front, because young people want to feel safe to be able to share their actual views on this issue. In the post, you can see there's really good context provided. So it says adults seem to be talking a lot about vaping, but they don't seem to be asking people your age about your views, ideas and experiences. I have created this survey to better understand vaping from your perspective. It also speaks to the audience and influence part, which Lundy says is really important. It says your responses will be shared with decision makers, so that response to vaping in schools and communities are informed by young people. And also specifies how long the survey will take. So the survey will only take a few minutes to complete, and your responses will be anonymous. This survey had 950 responses from young people aged 13 to 19 years old. And then all of those responses informed this report here that was released last year. And Emma can share a link to that report if you are keen to hear what young people do have to say about vaping. On the next slide, I have another example about a post about the period survey. The first thing I really like about this post is that it's got a great use of colour and it has a really nice youth feel. It's highly visual and not too wordy. It's also a really simple post. It just says, have you completed the period survey? It takes 3 minutes and covers issues of stigma, taboos and ease of access to products, facilities or educational resources. Complete it and pass it along. So this survey led to the development of a report we called Menstruation Matters, and that was informed by survey responses from nearly 3,000 young people between the ages of 7 to 22 years old. This report was one of a kind. Until this report was released, we didn't actually realise the extent that issues like period poverty were having and impacting young people in South Australia. So yeah, really incredible there. Wonderful, we'll go to the next slide. Before we jump into a few more examples, oh no, that's it. That's okay. We can jump into there.
Sorry.
No, before I'm going to give you a couple more examples from our work in a moment, but I just thought I'd do a quick check-in. So if you jump back into Slido, we have 2 short questions here. So first, I just want to check in, how are you finding the session? So please feel free to be honest, won't take offense. Great. And this, I kind of did this one because emojis can be quite good to use with young people when you're kind of, instead of stars and stuff, emojis can be quite a fun way to ask young people how they're finding something, whether that's school or how good a service is, things like that. Awesome. Great. We'll go to the next question. The next question, maybe just take a moment to share one key takeaway from the session so far. So anything that stood out, been a new learning for you, be great to share those. Yeah, going to them, consent, testing, 6 tips, strengths-based. Oh, amazing. I'm glad we're getting lots from it. And again, I've kept them all, they're more simple, but hopefully they are really practical, which helps. Yeah, reaffirms your existing work with young people. That's great to hear. Civics Toolkit. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Well, we'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Maria. Yeah. So here at CCYP, the Commissioner regularly engages with young people, children and young people, and their views and experiences inform her decisions her responses to decision makers. This generally involves simplifying complex, technical, wordy documents and proposals. So things like discussion papers, survey questions, parliamentary debates, proposed legislations and policies. And those things are usually designed for policy officers and adult stakeholders. So a lot of our work is simplifying that into questions in language that children and young people can relate to and respond to. So I'd now like to share 4 examples from our work with you. These examples all focus on simplification, as I think this is the thing that's most often missed. As adults, it's really easy to make things a bit too complex. If you leave with just one thing today, I hope it is keep it as simple as possible for children and young people. I can't emphasize that enough. Next slide. So our first example is from young people in voting in 2021. In mid-2021, proposed amendments to Electoral Act were discussed in lengthy parliamentary debates. Our office mapped out some of the complexities around these proposed amendments, which was very complex and policy heavy. So we had a 12-page internal document, reviewing all these changes in depth of how they'd impact young people. There was no public consultation, but the Commissioner created a survey for young people to inform her response to members of Parliament. So here on the screen, you can see is an example of survey, and it's an example of taking something very complex and asking for children and young people's thoughts on these changes in a simple, easy to understand way. This made it accessible and gave young people a mechanism to share their thoughts on these proposed changes. So a few things I really like about it. There's actually only 4 questions, really, really simple. Again, taking a 12-page document and asking 4 questions to young people. So how important do you think it is that young people vote? One of the changes that would reduce the amount of time people have to enrol. How do you think this will impact young people? What do you think governments need to consider to make it easier for young people to vote, to enrol to vote? And what are the barriers to voting? Also at the top, there's just a really simple explanation, and that again comes back to a really clear purpose. The South Australian government has introduced a bill that would change the law around state elections. To inform her response to the draft bill, the Commissioner wants to hear your thoughts about voting. Yes, this survey was through SurveyMonkey, someone has asked. So most of our surveys are through SurveyMonkey. But I believe you could use YourSAy in a way quite easily to do a format like this too. Wonderful. We'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Maria. Great. In 2020, YourSAy opened a consultation called Volunteering Strategy for SA Beyond 2020. And this was seeking community input to develop a second volunteering strategy to support and enhance volunteerism in South Australia. So from what I understand, the consultation wasn't designed for young people, so we modified it into a more youth-friendly way. And again, I just want to talk to the strengths of this survey. So as you can see, there's a really good purpose and introduction. So it just says the Commissioner wants to hear what young people think about volunteering. She's asking these questions to find out what you think works and what doesn't work for young volunteers and how young people could be better engaged and empowered in the community. Your responses will inform the Commissioner's feedback on the volunteering strategy for South Australia. By asking these questions, we hope to better understand the thoughts and experiences of children and young people in South Australia and advocate for changes on your behalf. So just by reading that, you can really understand how your views will be used, the impact it's going to have with decision makers. So it's going to inform the Commissioner's feedback on the strategy. Yeah, so it's quite a good example. Again, after the first few questions, 2 questions about how old they are and their gender. Again, it's got just, I think, 5 simple questions here. How would you describe volunteering? Is there a better word to use instead of volunteering? What do you think are the best things about volunteering? What makes it difficult for young people to volunteer? And how could we get more young people to volunteer? And then kind of just a space for any other comments. So super simple. That's not going to be a barrier for young people to engage in a few questions like that. It's quite an easy survey for young people to provide their thoughts. Go to the next slide. I think I've just got an example of the social media post. So I think they launched this survey on National Volunteering Week, and 9 days later, the Commissioner wrote this submission as well. So just, I like this example because it shows a quick, timely turnaround sometimes. Actually, when you're actively listening to young people regularly, you can turn things around quickly and say, yeah, we've got young people's views and this is, we want to respond and share what young people think about this issue. On to the next slide. Thanks, Maria. And finally, I want to talk about our postcards as an engagement tool. This is something we're quite proud of here at our office. Postcards are how we engage children between 8 to 12 years old, and they involve 3 or 4 simple questions on a hard copy postcard. So these are all physical postcards that get sent out to schools. We receive over 10,000 postcards from children across SA every year as part of our annual Student Voice Postcards initiative. And this is sent to all schools in South Australia with primary students. The Commissioner has also designed specific postcards. So this postcard is actually a more specific postcard to inform the review of the Children and Young People Safety Act. So this is for children in care. So it's quite a specific postcard for them. And again, I really like just a really simple intro on the other side. You can probably just already tell this is for a younger audience. It has a different feel. It feels a bit fun, very youth-friendly. So it says, throughout the year, the government will look at the child protection system. It is important that you have an opportunity to have a say on what you think about the system. This postcard is one way to have a say. It is anonymous. Again, that's really important from a safety point of view for this group. I will write a report with the postcards I receive and present it to government and others involved in improving care. So child-friendly in terms of language there. It's quite simple to understand what it's going to be used for. And then we have just a couple of simple questions, 4 simple questions. I wish, I feel safe when, I am worried that, and what I would like to change to make life better is. Yeah, if you go to the next slide. We do love these postcards here at our office. We actually really love reading them as well. It's really special to hear what kids across the state have to say. This is a postcard that was designed for OSH, so outside school hours care. It's a hard copy postcard that we post out to OSH centres. I think it's currently active, so this is something that we've even been doing this year. They complete it in person with their kids at the centre and then return it. For these postcards, we do recommend having an adult or teacher facilitate with kids under 12 years old. It does help, and it's also great for adults to be involved in that process of listening and engaging young people. So these postcards were used in one of the Commissioner's submissions to the SA Royal Commission into early childhood and care. Again, really simple. How often do they go to OSH? The best thing about OSH is, the worst thing about OSH is, and OSH would be better if. And you get some really beautiful responses. As you can see on the back side, there's a little picture of Helen, which makes her really kind of puts a face to a name and makes it really fun and feel like they're actually talking to an adult who's going to listen to them. And there's also space for them to draw a picture. For this age group, pictures can speak 1,000 words as well. So yeah, they're just some examples there. Wow, I think I've flown through lots of information there. So I'm now going to hand to Emma to talk a little bit more about our work and some of the resources we have available through the Civics and Citizenship Workshop website, and then we'll also have some time for questions.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Okay.
Thanks, Jasmine. We can probably turn the slides off if you want actually now, because I'm not sure. Have we got anything else on them?
Only,
yes.
no, only the Civics and Citizenship.
Oh no, leave it up then.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to well, thank Jasmine for that, because that was really, really helpful. I've certainly learned things because I don't really do any engagement, and that was really, really helpful and straightforward, which is great. Also gives a little bit of the kind of background that about why it's really important that we do engage with young people, and as well as the how. Just to explain, we're not a youth participation agency, if that's what we come across as. The commissioner was actually established under law, let me get the right piece of law, the Children and Young People Oversight and Advocacy Bodies, 2016. And since then, she has been the first Commissioner for Children and Young People, along with the Commissioner for Aboriginal Children and Young People, April Laurie, as well. And she is basically established as a statutory officer, an independent officer, with powers and functions to both liaise with young people and hear about what they think, but also to promote and advocate for their rights in line with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, of which Australia is one of the many signatory countries. So she really does advocate on a whole range of rights issues in terms of civil, political, economic, and social and cultural rights, I suppose, of the children and young people in South Australia. And that does actually cover Aboriginal children as well. It's just that April has a slightly different focus purely on the rights of Indigenous children in South Australia. So Helen regularly engages with young people, with Jasmine, and really sort of once a week is going out to schools and talking to people, as well as via her surveys and the postcards, which are probably the biggest piece of consultation that she does with young people. But a lot of her role is also about advocating. So she meets regularly with ministers, with senior executives across government and other agencies, in order to bring to the fore the things that young people have told her, and where there are concerns that their rights are not being met. So Jasmine's mentioned some of the things that she has written reports on or submissions on previously, but they really do cover a whole range of issues like youth justice, the rights of people in care, education, employment, poverty, lots and lots of issues. And if you have a look on her website, you can see all of the things that she has published. But one of the things that she is most clear on is the importance of giving young people a voice. And there is actually a report or issue brief, as it's called, that she put out, I think it was earlier this year, called The Barriers to Participation, which highlights where government and other decision makers may be haven't become aware of what those barriers are to young people that they need to get across. And those are the sorts of things that Jasmine's been covering today, about that need to simplify, about to go out to them, all of those points. So I would encourage you to read that brief. But also, as Jasmine mentioned, the Civics and Citizenship website has the engagement toolbox on there, which is full of useful tools for you to use as a help for you engaging with young people. But also, actually, more broadly on that website, there are some good examples of other governments or other organisations that have done some really great work in terms of engaging with children and young people. So I do encourage you to have a look on there, and you can probably get some ideas about sort of things to do. There's some brilliant examples. Scotland's been doing some brilliant stuff around children and planning and things like that. So a wide range of different resources that are out there. I think that's probably all I needed to cover today. So thanks for that, and thanks for listening. And I'll pass over to Maria, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
I think we now have got about 10 minutes left for questions, which is good. You never know if you're going to actually have enough time left. So I'm glad we have got a little bit of space for any questions that might have come up. And between myself, Maria and Emma, we can kind of work out who's best to answer them. So feel free to take yourself off mute, or you can pop a question in the chat.
Yes, we have 10 minutes, so yes, Laurel.
I'd like to know, have there been any initiatives about the preschool age? I'm actually looking to do an early intervention program in my local community, so I'm just setting that up now, and I really would like to know how we can get those really young people. I know you talked about OSH and and young people and primary school, but have there been any initiatives done on the earlier age? Because I know it's probably a little bit difficult, but normally we'd ask the parents, but when you're actually looking at vulnerable families, they don't know what they need. Whereas sometimes in a very, very simple way, asking the kids, would we look at more of the OSH kind of example that you provided, or is there any other examples?
And I think the early childhood OSH postcards are the main thing we've done with that younger age group. So they could be used, I think, as young as kids young as 4, potentially with OSH centres connected to kindergartens. Is that right, Emma? Yeah.
We've sent out some preschool postcards that are specific for them, that really focus on drawing pictures more than language. We do have someone in our team who has previous academic experience of doing consultations with very young children, so we could probably give you some advice on that.
That would be brilliant if you could connect with me on that, because when you're looking to do a course, you think, how do you know if it's going to meet the community needs? I've done community engagement, but how do you really know? How do you measure that? And I've connected with the Early Intervention Research Directorate that's doing a lot of good work in that, but really wanting to hear from the young people. So that'd be brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good idea, Emma. We can connect you. We've had another question in the chat. Do you need a working with children's check or RAN if you frequently engage with kids? I mean, my personal point of view would be yes, if you are, particularly if you are doing any face-to-face, yes, definitely. I'm not exactly sure on the specifics if it is just online consultation, Emma, but I would still probably recommend it.
I think any contact that you're having with your children and young people, we'd recommend that you have those checks. Yeah. Great. Eliza shared there's an excellent resource written by Harry and Anaskas and Pauline around engaging children in early childhood settings. Great. Oh, someone's holding up that. Thank you, Eliza. That could be a good starting place for you, Laurel, as well.
I also have a question, Jasmine. So what would you recommend will be the best or the average time frame to engage with young people? Like, for example, with YourSAy, we normally say to our agencies that the ideal time will be no less than 6 weeks, like minimum 4. But then, if you want to keep it longer, that's okay too. Like the longer, the better. But what will be the same sort of, is there any sort of standard rule or like an average sort of benchmark that you work with when you're engaging your people?
I do mainly face-to-face consultations, so that's slightly different. But in terms of our team that do more of the online consultations, I do think having a time frame is helpful, even in just when you're sharing on social media that you've got a deadline date, can be helpful to work towards and not mean that you're kind of just pushing it out and out for 3 months, and that can get a bit tiring to just both for you and for young people to kind of continuously seeing and being kind of bombarded with something that they need to do. So I do think having a window, a helpful 4 to 6 window is quite good. Yeah. Right. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Emma?
Yeah, it really varies in terms of the time that we do allow for surveys. So it just kind of depends on the kind of interest that we get. And if we're not getting enough interest, we'll have to push out via different channels and investigate the other options, leave it open for longer. It really does vary. But yeah, I mean, it could be as little as, a month. It could be 6 months. So yeah, it would vary. So you need to be aware of that.
Because sometimes things are timely, but there is a timely need to, because of the relevant political situation, to actually make sure young people do express a view. But other things like our postcards that are all done through the mail and get posted out and posted back, like they are open for a much longer period of time, over the course of kind of 6 to 9 months, really. And through following up, with schools directly. So yeah, different things will have different timelines.
The other question I had also, was for Emma. So Emma, in terms of the role of CCYP, like government agencies, will they be able to reach out to you guys for advice if they want to consult with young people, like with a cohort of young people, to sort of say, oh, this is our idea, this is what we want to do, what do you think, or what advice can you give us, or that sort of thing? Is that sort of the thing that the CCYP could do?
We can, to a limited extent, because it literally is Jasmine.
Right.
So we can advise to some extent, but really, if you're looking for more in-depth consultancy advice, then there are an increasing number of agencies out there that are dealing with children and young people as an engagement group. So I'd encourage you to do that. But yeah, if it's something brief, then we can probably do it. But yeah, otherwise it literally is Jasmine. So we can't be too in depth.
Yeah, understand. So I understand that it's not for the, like, if you want to, we need the full strategy on how to consult with these people. Of course, that's not something that you would do, but it's just, if it's sort of like a checking point, probably that will be more feasible. Is that what you're saying?
Probably the first thing to do is to go to that, to the Civics and Citizenship website, have a look on there, see if you can get the answer to your questions on there first. If not, do get in touch with us. Jasmine, are you happy for your details to be shared?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. Happy. And obviously we won't always be able to provide answers on everything, but sometimes we might be able to point you in the right direction if we're not able to help.
Right. Any other questions that the people may have?
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. We really enjoyed presenting to you, and hope it does actually give you something really practical to take away. And yeah, hopefully we'd love to hear stories of you engaging young people. That is our ultimate goal, to ensure more children and young people are heard. So we do hope you enjoy it as you give it a go.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I will share, I will send a follow-up email with all those links that have been shared in the chat. I'll probably just touch base with Jasmine to make sure they're all in there. And I'll also include the recording of the session, and I'll also include a short feedback form. If you can please just fill it out, let us know what did you think of the session, and it's very simple. It's a couple of minutes survey, so if you can just fill it out, that would be great. So I'll send that follow-up email today in the afternoon probably. So I really hope you have enjoyed the session, and yeah, reach out if you need any help. You know that YourSAy, with YourSAy, the cohort of young people is not great, it's not huge, but we still can use the platform for to drive our consultation. So if you need to consult with this cohort, and we have done it before, so we can do that and help share the word out. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you, Emma, for your help today. It was a great presentation, and certainly learned a lot, and hope you all did too. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.